Good evening, everybody, and welcome to the second Socialist Telly event of the night, which is hustings debate on the Hartlepool by-election between the two, at least notionally, left parties. And unfortunately, we have had no response from Labour candidate Paul Williams. Thelma Walker, who is standing as an independent party, but under the auspices if I understand it correctly, of the Northern Independence Party, has joined us. And my colleague Damien from Socialist Telly is also here, just in case my voice gives out, because I managed to inhale some brick dust earlier on and got a very sore throat as a result. And we will run this as a proper debate with both candidates given the opportunity to answer the questions. However, as we did say, we couldn't we put it out to any supporters of Dr. Paul Williams to come on the show and answer for him if they wanted to, and got no response from anybody on the right of the party prepared to do that either. So we will be representing Dr. Williams with an empty chair, and giving that a chance to respond, which no doubt won't take long, but it'll give Thelma a chance to catch her breath between responses. And we will say at the beginning of the programme, Socialist Telly is not advocating a vote for any party in this debate. We are purely giving people the chance to, people in Hartlepool and elsewhere, the chance to hear what is on offer from the candidates and what the candidates' views are. With that, we'll jump straight in. Thelma, anything you want to say before, or right at the beginning, before we start into the questions?
Well, no, just thank you very much for inviting me to join you. I've just arrived back from Hartlepool, had a wonderful day, another day in Hartlepool, talking to local people and engaging with the community, and forward to hearing what people have got to ask me. And I'm really looking forward to election day and hopefully becoming the MP for Hartlepool.
Very good. Okay, so we'll start with one of the thorny questions first, or maybe not. The Northern Independence Party has been accused of being a scam or a joke. That was by Labour officials, actually. Whether that's a sign of them being worried or a sign of genuine derision, I'm not sure. But are you splitting the Labour vote by standing in Hartlepool?
No, I think I should be really, really clear about this, that I was in the Labour Party for 40 years and really committed as an activist, and then obviously became a Labour MP. So when I made the really big decision, monumentous decision to leave the Labour Party, it nearly broke my heart and took me quite a few months to recover from that. It wasn't just a case of cutting up my membership card, and so when I first started to work with different left-wing groups and political parties behind the scenes, as it were, true democratic socialists, and then when I met Philip Proudfoot, the founder of the Northern Independence Party, I realised, despite the light-hearted social media and the kind of big involvement from the younger voters and generation, there was a really serious political message there. I'm a Northerner through and through, born in Manchester, lived in Combe Valley, Yorkshire for 30 years. And those policies that are in our manifesto spoke to me, and it is very serious political messaging about the North-South divide, which has grown wider. Life expectancy is going down, child poverty is going up, and people in the North, me, are cheesed off. We're sick of being second-class citizens. And I think what the Northern Independence Party are doing is bringing to the forefront, not just across the North, but across the country, that we've had enough of this, what I call crumbs from the Westminster table when it comes to funding, in terms of education, health, infrastructure, connectivity, all of these things. We can see we've had promises over the years, Northern Power, recently the levelling up, but we're not seeing it. Walk around the centre of our forgotten towns and they're boarded up. You've got queues at the food banks, and we've got to that point in the north where we're saying enough control from Westminster. We want to take back control in the region and in our northern, and we want ownership. Everybody's got a right to live with dignity, and everybody's got a right to have a good quality life. And so that's why I feel really passionate about it. And I also think that many of the policies that are in our manifesto are some are different, but most are building on that democratic socialism that was in the 17 and 19 manifesto. And I was completely devoted to that and to those policies. And I feel I've got that sense of the vision and almost like a euphoria about this campaign, that I'm back to really believing in that vision for democratic socialism. And I feel within this campaign and with the activists for the Northern Independence Party that there is hope returning. And if we can in the future bring together a left coalition of like-minded people with that same shared vision, I think that is a growing movement and could make such a vast difference. So I'm standing in Hartlepool because I want to represent these wonderful people and to deliver those democratic socialist policies. And I think the accusation from Labour about us being a scam actually is, as you say, Steve, really highlighting the fact that they are worried about us as a party and the impact having across the country, because we're being contacted by people across the country and our membership is going through the roof. And it's not just people who are living in northern towns and cities, it's people all over the country. And some of them are people who were born up north and are now living south or in other areas of the country. And some of whom had to leave the place where they were born up north to get the jobs down south. And that's one of the issues for the northern towns and region.
Okay, and I'll put the converse of that question to the Labour candidate, Dr. Paul Williams. Is the Labour Party, is the Northern Independence Party and the independent candidate standing under their flag a threat to the Labour Party or a scam? What do you think?
Oh, I would have liked to have heard.
Doesn't sound like there's a lot to be said on that one, but we will keep going back to the candidate. Who knows? And if he gets word of this, maybe he'll drop a comment in, and we can send him the link and get him actually on the program. So, I mean, I come from Middlesbrough, just on the other side of the river from Hartlepool, and so I consider myself reasonably knowledgeable about stuff that's going on in that area. But I wouldn't necessarily consider myself, a Hartlepoolian. So, one of the issues that's been thrown, not just at yourself, but, the Labour raised questions internally about Paul Williams because they said his knowledge of the area wasn't particularly good. Why should Hartlepool people, Thelma, vote for you if you're not local to them?
Yeah, I think I would understand anybody in Hartlepool saying, well, who the heck is this woman? She's not a local woman. And I'm not going to make excuses and say, oh yeah, I know the area really well or whatever. I'm getting to know the area. But I think what Hartlepool people need is authenticity and honesty. And I think the problem is with politics at the moment, there's a lack of trust in many politicians. And I think that what I want to get the message over to the people of Hartlepool is I'm not sending a local person. I'm a northerner through and through. But what I've had my career as a head teacher and in education for 34 years, I'm genuine about wanting to support the local community. I'm genuine about wanting to deliver those democratic policies that are going to improve the local people. As a head teacher, I worked in a school in a really deprived area in Dewsbury. and it had a Sure Start centre, and there was the agency working to help a vulnerable family and people in abject poverty. And I saw firsthand the negative effect on children, families of poverty. And this for me isn't a career, it's a vocation. And so really what I'm doing is giving my commitment to the people of Hartlepool to help improve where they live, although I'm very aware already from engaging with individuals, groups in the community, that quite rightly many people are very proud of Hartlepool and where they live. And I think that one of the things that the challenges for me, if I'm fortunate enough to be elected as MP for Hartlepool, is to realise the potential of such a great place with so much going on and such wonderful, warm people who I'm finding so easy to engage with. You know, that warmth and that northern humour and that honesty. And I'm really grateful, Steve, to get the opportunity to talk tonight so that people, hopefully many people in Hartlepool, can see that I am authentic in what I'm trying to do. And I'm not pretending to be a local person, but what I am it is a socialist and somebody who's genuine about wanting to improve of local people, to celebrate what's great about Hartlepool, but also to be a voice in Westminster. And one of the things, because I have been an MP for 2.5 years, one of the things I can do is I'm running in Westminster because I know how it works. And so I'll be able to go down to Westminster and speak up on behalf of people in Hartlepool, and I won't be starting from scratch. I'll have that experience behind me. I'd love the opportunity, not so much Westminster, because I never loved it, to be honest with you. I mean, one of the things I want to do is to be able to, as I say, speak up and take that control from Westminster, and bring as much funding as possible back to Hartlepool in any way I possibly.
Thank you. Let me throw that to the Labour candidate. Dr. Williams, you were the subject of an internal discussion in the Labour Party that raised concerns about your knowledge of the Hartlepool area, even though you were, for a time, the MP for Stockton South, not very far away from Hartlepool as it is. How would you respond to that? Why would the people of Hartlepool vote for you as somebody who's not from that area, given the Labour comments?
He's quite subdued, isn't he?
It doesn't look like we're getting a word on that one. Damo, I think you're going to field the next question for us.
Yeah, why not, Steve? Thank you very much. Welcome, Thelma. Thank you very much for joining us tonight. And one of the things that has occurred to me is down here in Cornwall, it might be a bit odd with people thinking, what's that southerner doing on here asking questions? But down here in Cornwall, we have a lot of people that stand as independent candidates. And a lot of people struggle to fathom why on earth, what influence an independent candidate can do. And I suppose the question occurs to me as well, how will you improve the lives of people in Hartlepool as one independent MP?
Yeah, good question. And I suppose you could say, well, you're going to be really isolated there, aren't you, as just one independent MP? But you just look at individual. If you look through history at individual politicians and the change and the difference some have made, and I've never held back. When I was in Westminster, I always spoke up on behalf of the community Valley who were represented at that time, and I think I feel very much, even though I'd be an independent MP, I feel very much that I was part of a wider democratic socialist movement. And I think there would be people in Parliament that would be have this a similar goals, similar vision. But I as I say, I've got this experience of already being in Parliament, and I'm not afraid of speaking my mind. And I have challenged the government with Prime Minister's questions in debates. And there's a saying, isn't there, about a mosquito being so tiny, but in a large room can be very, very irritating. And I think I might be the one MP, but I think I can be very irritating for those who might try and block my desire to improve things for people in Hartlepool.
Oh, warning shot across the bows of any MP that dares cross Thelma Walker's.
I can put my head to voice on there, Damo,
We have to put the similar question to Dr. Paul Williams, I guess. Obviously not standing as an independent MP, but facing a candidate who speaks their mind and is prepared to be very irritating. What do you say to that, Dr. Williams? Right, stunned into silence.
Nothing else coming there, sadly. Okay, we did get a question come in there from Lex Cameron. We'll throw that in outside the usual mix here. Are you serious about independence?
Yeah, I've been asked that quite a bit, really. I think, obviously, in our kind of vision statement in the manifesto, it is about ultimately independence. There would be a referendum on that in years to come. For me, if I'm being completely frank, for me it's about federalism, it's about regionalism, and it's about localism. And I think that when I was on the Education Select Committee, when I was an MP, we went on a visit as a select committee to Stuttgart in Germany. And I saw how the education model worked with the federal system and the funding and the investment from business. And I was just kind of blown away with how it worked and how local people had that ownership of and control of spending. So I honestly, do believe that federalism and then localism in terms of community wealth building, social enterprise, cooperatives, insourcing rather than local councils not going out to tender out of the area, but insourcing so that people are in control of their local economy and there's that community wealth building. And mutual aid is the way forward. I think there's the Preston model that lots of people look at, but I think it's possible with cooperative social enterprise. When I talked earlier about realising the potential of Hartlepool, that I think that there is such potential, especially I'm engaging with people from culture, creative arts, music, such potential there. And I'm really excited about what is doable if we had that local economy. So lots of ideas in my head about how we could develop that. But for me, in the short term, I'd be working towards that federal and local model with the economy. The independence bit is in the long term.
Okay, doesn't really make sense to put that one to Dr. Williams, so the chair's getting a break on this occasion. But this one should be a particularly strong opportunity for Labour to chip in, given that their candidate is an NHS GP. What should the big hospital in that area? Well, there's two. There's the South Tees one. James Cook University Hospital is called now, but there's also North Tees and Hartlepool, which would be very relevant as an employer as well to people in that area, as well as a provider of health. What should the nurses' health pay rise be, and why? Thelma, we've got you first.
Yeah, well, I've campaigned to retain hospital and health services for a number of years in Colne Valley, and we did manage to retain our A&E, unlike, sadly, for Hartlepool. But I just couldn't believe it when the government offered the nurses 1%. in the recent budget statement. But then I did expect, when Labour spoke up, for something. Well, I'll say what I think in a minute. But when 2.1% from Labour, I couldn't believe it. Well, you know, the very people that have got us through this pandemic, along with other public sector workers and other people who have, you know, kind of, and some sacrificed their own lives. I mean, just incredible that these very people should be offered something that, an amount that in real terms, if you think about the cost of living increases and the fact that they've had the public sector pay freeze, that in real terms, it's up to about 12% less that they're being paid when heating and eating bills have gone up, have gone through the roof. So a minimum of 12%, and to give 15% would be a small increase on what would give some parity. And I absolutely believe that the nurses, of all people, but I believe that of all public sector workers, really should be given a 15% pay rise. I mean, what they've sacrificed and what they've done, especially, which they always do, but over this past year, and I think it's just such an insult, and especially, you know, the clapping on the doorstep and all this business, and saying thank you very much. It doesn't pay the rent or the mortgage or the food bills. And we've got nurses at food banks. Not acceptable. I feel really strongly about it. So 15% for nurses.
Yes, I mean, the other thing as well that I think would come up as a question really is, you know, given the poverty and the unemployment and other factors affecting that area, and the size of the hospital trust as an employer, what kind of impact would a proper pay rise for nurses have on the local economy?
Yeah, of course. I mean, this is the short-sightedness, isn't it, of, well, any pay deal where they are not actually respecting people and treating them with dignity. But of course, it's about dignity of life. It's about quality of life. But it's just common sense that if people have got a higher wage and they've got more disposable income, they're going to go to the restaurants or the cinema or the pub. They're going to buy more things. And it goes back into that local economy that I was talking about before. And everybody benefits. The businesses benefit. And I can never get my head around people, you know, politicians who don't see this. And it's almost like a control thing of, you know, certain groups of, well, especially public sector, is to suppress their pay and freeze their pay. When long term, it is just has a negative impact on the communities.
Yes, thank you for that. Dr. Williams, as an NHS GP, this should be a strong area for you. There are also questions to answer though about your own involvement with, you know, organisations that I understand, if I've got that right, would have a part in some element of privatisation, private provision within the NHS. And I think you've spoken out on behalf of those in the past. What do you have to say on that question, please? Nope.
That's shameful. That should be its strongest area.
Yes, it should. And, you know, but I mean, so, you know, I will interject on this, that at the moment, the Labour Party needs to up its game substantially on the NHS from a very clear position of ending privatisation previously. You know, it's now a lot more mealy-mouthed and a lot more equivocal. And, you know, the health team does seem to be broadly relaxed, let's say, put it charitably, about the idea that, you know, private provision in the NHS. I think the Health Secretary, John Ashworth, said the day that didn't really matter as long as people getting their health treatments. But, you know, if you're taking profit out of the NHS, that's not all getting spent on, you know, on provision of care and on wages for people who will be boosting the local economy. Next question, let's move on. So, I mean, Hartlepool is, you know, like the borough where I come from, a little bit off the beaten track for a lot of people. It does have the A19 going right past there, but it's not the easiest place to get to in terms of mainline rail, etc. Thelma tell us about buses' lack of connectivity and the impact that has on the local people?
Yeah, I've been talking to local people about this just over this last week, and what I didn't know that I know now is that a lot of the buses don't run after 6:30 in an evening. You know, out of the town into the town. I mean, what do you think if people haven't got a car? What do they think people are going to do to go and visit relatives, or to just go out socialising or whatever? So it's just a basic thing like that, changing the bus timetables, having more frequent bus service, and having the public ownership of the bus service as well, because connectivity is a big thing that's coming up when I'm talking to local people. Same with the train service as well, because it also opens up so much more for local people too. Also, there's a cost. I mean, I noticed the cost from when I was in Westminster about how much cheaper bus fares are down in London compared to up north. So definitely we need to look at bus and rail services to, again, improve the quality of life. And why should it be inferior to the service that they're getting down south? I don't know what it's like down in Cornwall, Damo, but a lot of the rural areas in particular are ill-served in terms of connectivity. So it's about the community, people in the community coming together. It's about their opportunities to get jobs in just outside the area. All of those things that need looking at. So it's cost of it, it's frequency of it, and it's ownership of it. That's the important thing about local transport.
Very good. Dr. Williams, does Hartlepool deserve to have better transport links, and would that benefit the area? Still not very talkative. It is obviously awkward and embarrassing to keep putting this picture up on the screen. However, I would counter that it's not as awkward and embarrassing as it is that the Labour Party candidate isn't on here to answer questions and talk to the people who he is hoping are going to vote for him.
It's not an embarrassing photo you could have used, Steve.
Well, that's true, but I thought, we want to maintain impartiality, due impartiality on this photo.
Back to your last point, actually, Thelma, you're absolutely right. I mean, the issue with buses and trains down here is exactly the same as what you've just spoken about in Hartlepool. Of course, the southwest is served by one main line, which is awfully close to the coast and got washed away a few years ago. In case you might remember. And yes, transport links were definitely difficult at that point in time. But my next question for you is a bit of a departure from transport, and it's on employment, essentially. The scourge of zero-hour contracts have been a menace to society for some time. The gig economy is rotten to its core. Is zero-hour contracts a big issue in Hartlepool, and do you think they should be banned?
Yeah, well, unemployment's a massive issue, full stop. But 0 hours contracts, the people have certain things that they should have a right to and be able to. And in my opinion, feeling secure in your work and your employment hours has to be a priority. And we've got so many people now in the gig economy that it's the longer term impact. Well, it's not just on the individual who has that job insecurity. It has an impact if they've got a family as well, and how the family operates, and the negative impact it can have on the family, and that constant sense of. It's almost like my granddad was a coach painter in Ancoats in Manchester, and he used to we go out every morning and he'd stand at the factory gates waiting to know whether he'd got employment for that day, and he used to go back and my gran used to shout at him if he hadn't got any work that day. I can laugh, but actually he was such a dignified man that it was humiliating for him. And I can remember feeling embarrassed for him that my gran had had a rant because she was stressed and anxious about not having enough money. Felt responsible for that because she was working in the cotton mill. And you could feel the stress there. So I kind of, it's going back some, I know, but it's almost like the factory gates again, where people are waiting by the phone to know how many hours they've got or whether they're working that week. But if your bills don't go away that week, and if you've got that, low pay, insecure pay, you haven't got savings. And this is what gets me so angry about the Tories as well, especially the ones we've got at the moment on that front bench, because they're so far removed from a world like that. They're so far removed away from having that sense of fear of thinking I'm going to have to queue at the food bank this week. No sense of worrying about whether they can feed the children or heat the house. That's what drives me on to do what I'm doing, actually, because I saw them firsthand when I was in Westminster. They haven't a clue about that. They haven't a clue about what it is to be scared to death that you can't feed your own children. So yes, Dan, I feel absolutely that everybody has the right to feel secure in the workplace and safe in the workplace as well, because it's not just about insecure pay and inadequate salary and wages. It's actually about workers' rights and protections as well, and people being safe in the workplace, because I know that many people are exploited, and their work conditions are just not acceptable. So thank goodness for the unions and the work that they're doing to protect people, but a lot of work to do. But yeah, I will always speak out against insecure work.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think the sitting by the phone is like a virtual factory gate these days, isn't it? It's a similar case. You're waiting one day to the next, wondering if you've got work today or if you have not. And nobody can live like that. Nobody can plan for the future like that. So it seems to me that the social contract that we have, we expect in society to, get a job, earn a wage, and that should cover all your bills, all your living expenses, and a bit to spend on the side to keep the economy ticking over, because that's how the economy grows, spending locally in the economy, money in people's pockets. It's just been eroded all over again when you thought we'd improve from things, and it's sort of slid away again, and it is undignified. I can understand that I can sort of relate how your grandfather must have felt having to return home with no work that day. It does strip people of their dignity and their self-worth and their self-respect. And in that vein, one solution that comes up time and again in conversations such as these is universal basic income and restoring dignity by restoring effectively the social security net so that it actually is secure again. What do you think of UBI?
Yeah, well, I've been a keen supporter of UBI even when I was in Parliament and when I was an MP, even when Labour at that time, and I was working in the shadow team, that it wasn't a policy, it wasn't in our manifesto in 17 and 19, but I actually did want it to be. So I'm really delighted that with the Northern Independence Party, that is in our manifesto, because I do believe, especially now, through this pandemic and coming out of this pandemic, I can't think of a better time when people would need that safety net of that basic income. And with it being universal, I think that's what makes it a bit like child benefit when everybody got it or gets it. It's that one group can't say, well, I'm not paying for that person to have it, because if everybody gets it, then it's a basic amount. It's not as much as people need. But when we're talking about people unable to pay for their groceries or pay for their heating bill, if you just had enough to take that, I was talking about that stress and anxiety that many families feel. Or on the other hand, people can decide to do with it what they want. They might want to take up training to do the skills or take a risk and maybe decide to go for a 3-day week and do some training on the other days. But it would be up to that individual person. So it would be like they're not waiting for handouts. It would be everybody's right to have that basic amount and to improve the quality of their life. And I just think, especially post-pandemic, because if you think about it, furlough, that's what furlough's doing at the moment for a hell of a lot of people. And funnily enough, the government can suddenly afford that. So I would love to trial it. I'm not saying I've got all the answers with it, because it's still at the pilot stage, even in Scandinavia. But a basic amount, and we're talking in our manifesto about basic amount maybe of £400 a month. But for a lot of those people that are queuing up at the moment at the food banks, it would stop all of that. It would prevent that, because what's been happening with the food banks is it's been normalised. Like, oh, right, well, that's what people do when they can't afford to pay their bills. Well, no, they don't have to. And I honestly think UBI, let's say, especially now, would be worth trialling, and I'd love to see it tried in Hartlepool.
Yeah, I think the other
Oh,
thing.
well, we had a comment come in on the show there. I'll just throw in, Damo, before you put the questions to the other candidate. But 14,000, nearly 14,000 universal credit claimants in Hartlepool, and we've seen over the past few years what an absolute disaster and dog's breakfast, as well as punitive, the universal credit system's been. Labour never quite, well, under Corbyn, it was enough of a battle with the right-wing Labour trying to prevent him going there, but never quite reaching the point of just saying we'll scrap it, and then they did. But that seems to have evaporated again under Keir Starmer now. So, the universal basic income would certainly be a massive simplification of the system and a big ease for a lot of people.
I think when we're talking
mentioned
about dignity of life, and respect for each other, there's so much more in UBI than waiting for handouts.
Well, you did a show, Demo, didn't you? Not was it last weekend, about the pittance that people get as carers?
Universal, unpaid carers. Yeah, I've actually got a question here on that in a moment, if you want to come back to me on that. The one thing I was going to say on the UBI, though, I was just going to touch on, is the fact that universal benefits, non-means tested, they're so much cheaper to administer. There's no having to go through reams and reams of checks and all the rest of that. It saves a huge amount of money. So there's a lot to be said for that. But yeah, I just want to see if Dr. Williams might agree with you on that point as to whether UBI is a something that's worth trialing. Perhaps Labour would like to try perhaps he would like to fight for that as well and see that rolled out in Hartlepool, or what his opinions on 0 hours contracts are. Dr. Williams, have you got an opinion on that, please?
Doesn't look like it. Do you want to put your other question to Thelma?
Yeah, it's just because I'm a former disability coordinator and I'm an unpaid carer myself, and I did this show last week where we had unpaid carers on. And we discussed this issue because it's not one that gets discussed a heck of a lot. And unpaid carers saved the nation £135 billion a year, but people have had to give up work to care for sick and disabled loved ones. They've got to work for a minimum of 35 hours a week to get £67.60 it is now. It works out at roughly £1.92 an hour. No one would work for that out of choice. So I'm interested to know what the Northern Independence Party might do to raise this issue and fight the injustice of these often forgotten people, and indeed disabled people themselves, who faced all manner of hardship after 11 years of austerity.
Well, I think I used to be a carer for my mom for quite a number of years, and just for granted really that you just do it, don't you? And I just think that I keep talking about this living with dignity, and I think that's part of it, isn't it? I think that that if you are a carer, then you are entitled, even if you do it. I did it for my mum out of love and compassion and all that, or even a sense of duty. It is still taking from you as a carer that opportunity to seek work elsewhere, and every carer has a right to be paid a decent amount of money to make them be able to carry out that support with dignity themselves, and not to feel that it is well, I suppose a means of supporting somebody that they care about and love at the expense of everything else. And I think that is the issue. That is the issue, that your life is sometimes on hold as a carer, and yet you feel guilty if you don't give that person your utmost care and attention and love. So I think there's that emotional thing going on as well, if you've ever been a carer, which I do understand. But I just think there's an entitlement there, and I certainly would speak up in Westminster. I mean, Labour in 2017-19 with their policies had some marvellous policies on inclusion for all sorts of things, for disabled people with nothing about us, without us. I don't know if you're part of the manifesto. And I just thought that was just so brilliant. But I'm not hearing, I mean, we're not hearing tonight, are we, from the Labour candidate, but I'm not hearing generally what are the policies? What are the policies for people on 0 hours contracts? What are the policies from Labour for carers? And how are they going to be supported and recompensed for the time that they give in care and devotion to people they love, but really excluding them from employment in other areas? So I'm not hearing those policies from Labour, but certainly I know the whole value base of the Northern Independence Party. It is about inclusion, is about dignity at work, and is about supporting families and those suffering disability. So I feel very confident that I'm with a party, I am a member of NIP, that would speak up on behalf of carers and their exploitation. I know that to be true.
Thank you very much for that answer. That was very thoughtfully and sensitively handled, actually. Dr. Williams, Thelma Walker has asked about policy. She's come up with a few policy discussions already. She's come out with a number of points that the Northern Independence Party would like to introduce, would like to cover. But what's your opinion on carers and 0 hours contracts? What are the policies behind that? I know in the last manifesto, the policy for carers was to uprate it to at least the level of job seekers allowance, and then revisit the situation after that. Is that still the official Labour policy? Is that a position you would still want to campaign on and fight for?
Well, on the performance so far tonight, I have to say that given Keir Starmer's refusal this morning to sign a letter to call for an investigation into Boris Johnson's dishonesty, the empty chair at least looks like it would be in line for a front bench position if it managed to win the election in Hartlepool. Okay, so Thelma, you've been on the show previously to talk about education, and you had an education brief, if I remember correctly, when you were on the Labour front bench under Jeremy Corbyn.
Education Select Committee. I was
Select Committee. That was it.
I was PTS for John McDonnell, and I was on the Select Committee.
Excuse my slight misremembering. So, what do you think about the way that education is done now? And I'll add on to that as well. What do you think about the withdrawal of the free school meal provision that's been, that was briefly extended during the
I'll start with pandemic. I'll start with the free school meal. Absolutely appalling. I mean, the two policies in the NIP manifesto that I really love as a former head teacher is the UBI. and the free school meal for every child policies, because that would be a real straightforward addressing families living in poverty. So I think that that those two policies, I think, are superb, and I would completely, a child have a warm meal every, guaranteed, would improve the lives of and the health of so many children. But with regard to education at the moment, I'm really concerned. Really concerned about, well, so many aspects of education, and I think that I don't know where to begin with this. I could have spent the whole program talking about my concerns about the curriculum, about lack of adequate funding for the schools dealing with the pandemic. There was a report over the weekend about an exodus of head teachers. 10 years of austerity and budget cuts to the school budgets, but then this pandemic year, when there's been conflicting advice from the government about COVID safety, etc., and heads have taken all this on board themselves, make those decisions in the school when it's literally life and death. And the pressure on them has led to many of them saying they're going to see through the next few months, because obviously we're still going through the COVID, but many of them are going to quit. And what we've got with this government is this, and I do think this is a thing as well, that especially in the working class areas where there's areas of deprivation, there have been massive budget cuts. There's not been enough funding to support special needs, kids with special needs. There's not been, got the free school meals impact of that. Cuts to Sure Start, and I was ahead with a school with a Sure Start centre, cut back multi-agency working, and it's that early intervention that's really important for children and families. It's getting in there early to make sure those families are getting the support they need. So I don't know where to begin with education at the moment, because it just needs so much change. And as I say, that there almost is a class thing of kids who are in state education. It's almost like, we'll get the basics, English and maths, and then there's no paritative esteem with the subjects like creative arts, music, and the culture that is so important to every individual. And the cuts are being made in many of the working class areas and in those schools, so that it's the working class kids who need those opportunities to do the music, to do the art, etc. And previously, there was an arts pupil premium in the manifestos in 2017 and 19 to make sure that every child had that opportunity. What the Tories want is to keep working class kids in their box, give them this straitjacket curriculum, don't give them any opportunities for critical thinking or questioning. And we don't want that, and just equip them with the skills to serve the establishment. That's how I see what they're doing. And that it's the Michael Gove ideology in education, which has done so much damage. And what we've got with Williamson at the moment, Williamson, is this good, effective teaching is somebody standing at the front and kids all sitting in. And that is, I mean, I'm a great believer in the Finnish Scandinavian model of education, where there's no formal education, play-based learning till they're 7. That teachers, it's a high bar to get into teaching at master's level, but the profession is trusted. There's not the external Ofsted, which Northern Independent Party would abolish off. But the profession is trusted to assess children, to monitor the progress, and low outdoor learning, so that kids learn through play-based learning as well, So much I could talk about, but so much. What frustrates me is how it could be, and loads of parents believe. Oh, this is the thing. This is a really interesting thing that COVID has exposed, because parents have been at home trying their best to teach their kids when schools have been closed. They've been looking at the curriculum. A lot of parents I've spoken to, and they said, "I can't. Why is my primary school kid abstract nouns and things? Why do we need to know about that? Why is it, asking loads of questions?" And you can see now that parents are seeing the job that teachers have and how brilliant they are, most teachers. The great positive of this pandemic, I think the teaching unions have been absolutely superb. I think they've shown the leadership that's been missing from Gavin Williamson, FE. And I think the unions have so well supported the teaching profession and school people working in school staff, and shown that leadership direction. I'm a member of the and I just have immense respect, not just for NEU, but NHT, ASK, all of those unions that have spoken up and stood up to the DFE and Gavin Williamson. And I profession and parents are very appreciative of that.
Yes, and I will say, on that, it's not just on issues directly relating to kind of education and the curriculum that the teaching unions have led the way in the last year. We've seen them speaking out in terms of, safety for families, safety for vulnerable kids, safety for, in the classrooms for their own members, obviously, but also for the families who were at risk of catching infections from kids who were being sent into school when it wasn't safe. So on that point, I'll put that across to Dr. Williams. Labour's leader said no ifs, no buts. He wanted them back in school in September. What does Labour have to offer on the education issue? And what do you think about the withdrawal of the free school meals during the, that were extended during the pandemic? Chair's still angling for that front bench position.
Yeah, I would have liked to have seen Labour, just on that, I would have liked to have seen Labour support the unions far better than they did the teaching unions. I was very disappointed with that.
Yeah, so I think, I was disappointed a few years ago when the NEU decided not to affiliate to the Labour Party, but, they probably had some foresight in the decision that their conference made, by the looks of it.
Mm.
Right, well, I'll move on to my next question in that case. You spoke earlier about how magically the government could come up with the money to pay for the furlough scheme and keep people's incomes ticking over. I remember during the first lockdown, they also managed to solve homelessness almost overnight by taking everybody off the streets for fear that they would end up spreading COVID. They haven't done it since, however. There's a lot of people back on the streets again, but there's also a lot of empty homes around too. Do you have an idea what the empty home issue is in the Hartlepool, what the homelessness issue is in that area, and what would you do about the homelessness crisis in light of all these empty homes that happen to be lying around the country?
Yeah. It's clear it is doable to take everybody off the streets, and if you remember, I always remember Jeremy Corbyn being asked what would be the first thing you would do when you are prime minister. And if you remember, the first thing he said, I would make sure nobody was homeless and there was nobody on the streets. And I thought that just summed up, well, Jeremy, and it summed up what it is to be a true list. They made a mistake, didn't they, by acting so swiftly to get people off when the pandemic started, to get them off the streets and put them in those hotels and in empty houses. It proves it can be, and it proves that it's a political decision to put people on the streets and to let them homeless. So it's a bit like, you know, using science to develop the vaccine so quickly, and to yes, to make PPE for the benefit. You know, all that was changed quickly during the pandemic. These things are possible. I have to be honest, I haven't the actual data to hand in terms of the level of homelessness in Hartlepool. I do know about the increase in the use of food, and there are lots of empty houses in Hartlepool could be being used and refurbished. And I was speaking to somebody at the Annex community hub just a few days ago, who was saying that like a social enterprise and a community group would come together to take some of the empty houses to refurb, and we're looking for funding to do. So I do know that there are projects, but it's part of my engagement with the community that
Podcast in general,
I need to find more about.
Sorry, Thelma, I lost the signal there. I wasn't sure if other people did, so I was talking at the same time. I hope I didn't interrupt you.
Yeah, no, that's good. No, just that is part of my engagement with the different groups that I'm meeting at the moment to find out what the true figure is. But as I say, there are a lot of empty homes, and it is part of the Northern Independence Party policy to make sure that empty homes were used to house the homeless, and increase tax for second home owners as well, to support that. Dr.
Williams, there's more policy stances from the Northern Independence Party there on empty housing. As Thelma said, it was one of Jeremy Corbyn's very first things he said he would do. It was the first thing he would say he would do if he became Prime Minister, was to resolve homelessness. Is this a big issue on your doorstep, Rounds? Is this something you've heard on the doorstep? Are you looking to repurpose empty homes as well?
Again, not much response coming through there, sadly.
Pleading the very subdued.
We'll give him a few more seconds, see if there's a response. No, looks like that's it. So the remaining issues among the questions that we've had, unless anybody else who's watching at the moment wants to submit some, that we'll bring in for the last couple of minutes. But the issue of drug dependency and antisocial behaviour in Hartlepool, what have you found out about that while you've been out on the doorstep?
Well, it's a big issue. I mean, just from talking to one of the groups that I was speaking to last week, the cuts to local council budgets have made a big impact on in terms of youth clubs, early intervention, agents working, and there's a real need for, as I say, that early intervention. And I was a bit, when Labour, was it last week, when they were talking about increasing the number of antisocial behaviour and all this, and linked to drug dependency, and I just thought, is this Labour saying this? Because it's clear we've had a police chief say that we've got to kind of end poverty. We're going to, reduce crime, and it's clear to anybody, any kind of social conscience, that this is all about investing in early intervention and having rehab centres and needle exchanges, and support for those who are drug dependent. And we all know that can happen. It's not just to people who are not wealthy. It can happen to any family in any community as well. And we're seeing that due to closure of youth clubs, due to closure of centres like Lifeline and rehab centres, that it's on the increase. But it's this blame culture or this control of, oh, more police will sort the issue out. Well, it won't, and it's about supporting people with what is in fact a public health issue, and a health issue where young people in particular, but all people, need support. Hartlepool does have an issue. It does have a problem, and it can happen in any family and to any individual. And I hate this current blame culture that's coming not just from the Tories but from Labour itself, and without thinking about why is this happening. We've got highest unemployment in the country. Young people have to have that hope for the future and that belief that they will get a good job and they will have positive relationships. And if people don't have that hope and don't have that support, then they will resort to substance misuse, and they may resort, and I'm not condoning it, if people haven't got any hope, that's what happens to them. So instead of condemning and blaming, look at why is it happening? Where do we need to invest that support? And NIP is to decriminalise and legalise cannabis, which is one of our policies. And if you look at Portugal, since they had that decriminalisation of drugs, then the number of deaths, the number of people drug dependent has plummeted, and of course the time spent by the police dealing with drug related crime. So that goes out. It's what we were saying before, that if you invest in something, then long term beneficial to everybody. So there is an issue in Hartlepool, but it's something that I would immediately engage with and work to see what can we do with the early intervention with the community to support people who are suffering.
Yes. I can't even bring myself to ask the question, but we'll just show the empty chair. Just to make sure we're, people are aware that we did give the opportunity to the Labour candidate to come on the show and answer questions if he wanted to. There is a persistent question coming up from the user on YouTube by the looks of it, Grace Swans, asking about the whether Thelma would back the age 50 pensions credit. I guess Grace Swans missed the part of the program where we did discuss that, and your answer, if I remember correctly, was that you would want to consult with the people who were affected with that, because different groups are putting forward different solutions. And but you would want to resolve that issue in some way that would be acceptable to the people who've been hit by it.
Yeah.
Would that be a fair summary?
Yeah, I mean, I'm a WASPy woman myself, but I know I'm fortunate that from a previous career I've got a private pension. But many WASPy women thought that they were going to get their pension entitlement when they were 60, and only found out shortly before. They weren't informed either by letter or anything. So it's been a massive shock. And if that's your only income, then it's caused real hardship. The issue in terms of pension justice for 1950s women, though, is that there are different campaign groups wanting different things. Some want to claw back to 60, pension age at 60. Some want to be given pension credits or some form of pension to take them up to that 66 age instead. There's all sorts of different demands, and I think the important thing is to have the conversations. I've met with the leaders of the WASPy women campaign in Hartlepool, and they were brilliant. I had a really good discussion and a good laugh, I have to say, with the WASPy women, and they talked about reaching a compromise just to make sure that that women born in the 50s do get pension justice, and some have lost out on thousands and thousands of pounds with that increase to for me until I'm 66. It's a big deal of money, and many who that is would have been their only income. It's caused real hardship. So I think what I would be doing is having the conversations with all the campaigning groups for pension justice, and because we are. NIP is a very democratic party, and we do have those conversations, and we do listen to people, and the members in particular have a say in policy development, and so I think I've had that conversation with WASPI. I'd love to talk to Grey Swans, and WASPI women were talking about a compromise that would suit the majority of 1950s born women, and I'd love to have a conversation with Grey Swans and see whether we can all come together.
Thank you. Last 2 minutes of the program, then I won't ask a question, but we'll just throw it to you, Thelma, on any particular topic that you want to talk about, what message you want to bow out with, or points you want to make that you don't think have been covered so far.
Well, thank you for having me on. Thank you for giving me this opportunity to just share what I believe, what I think I can contribute to Hartlepool, how I can be a voice for Hartlepool in Westminster. I hope that I've come over as an authentic, genuine person that you local people could trust. I think that from meeting with members of the community, I just know I'd be really happy being the MP and working in Hartlepool, because they're just the warmth of the welcome and the engagement and the humour from the local community has just been brilliant. I also know, and as I mentioned earlier, that many people in Hartlepool love where they live and are proud of where they live, but they are fed up of not getting adequate funding. And so I will work my hardest to make sure that I am a voice to represent people in Hartlepool, and I will challenge the lack of investment, lack of proper support for infrastructure, but as a priority for me, it would be tackling the issue of unemployment, child poverty, the queues at the food banks, all of those issues, but also developing and celebrating all that's possible that we can do in Hartlepool with such talented, wonderful people. So I'd love the opportunity to do that. And thanks very much to Socialist Telly for having me on this evening.
Thank you very much for coming. Even just in that one thing, you outdid some of your opposition. And I will just finish off with a quick plug for the program to watch on Catch Up that we broadcast just before this one, where we interviewed, a very entertaining interview with Miltos Yerolemu, Game of Thrones star, and Ramona McCartney from the People's Assembly about an important protest that's coming up in June when the restrictions drop if things stick to schedule, and to encourage everybody to not just watch the rest of the programs on Socialist Telly throughout this week, but also to make sure that you get onto your favorite social media platform, find our channels and hit the subscribe button, and make sure where appropriate to hit the bell icon to get the make sure that as the programs come out that you get notified about that and you don't miss out on something good. Thank you ever so much to our guests. Thank you to everybody who's watched. Good luck to the people of Hartlepool in choosing the right representative next month. And we will look forward to seeing you again soon. Thank you very much, everybody. And one last point there, just a reminder,